Good afternoon, everyone. I trust we're all doing great. It's a wonderful afternoon, and I'm happy to see that we have two of our mentors already on call, and also a few of our mentees here. We hope shortly that we have more mentees joining in the session. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. My name is Dennis Williams, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We are all officially welcome to the fourth week of our JIIPCC mentorship and internship program. And our topic for today is fintech contracts and transactions. Very shortly, we'll be getting to hear from our mentors on the subject matter for today. But before we do that, I would just like to take a few announcements, right? So the first announcement is that or the only announcement rather, is that registration for the next quarter of mentorship is already ongoing. So please, if you have friends and family who would be interested in our program and our mentorship, you can always reach out to them and let them know that registration has begun, and we look forward to also having in those quarters to come more mentors and more mentees, so we can share the good gospel or the good news of of what Gypsy is doing. Our available courses for mentorship are intellectual property, artificial intelligence and technology, the energy industry, fintech industry, health tech and law, patent drafting, blockchain, NFT and metaverse, data privacy and protection, entertainment business and law, and alternative dispute resolution. So going straight to introducing our mentors for today. Our first mentor for today is Mr. Raphael Okeke. Mr. Raphael Mr. Raphael Okeke, experienced legal professional with a demonstrated history of success in corporate transaction and contract management with the telecommunications, technology, aviation, enterprise business, and real estate sector. With over 13 years of progressive experience, um, he has he has a proven track record of delivering results in complex legal environments. As a legal advisor at MTN Nigeria Communication PLC, he has been instrumental in managing diverse contracts and commercial transactions, including providing legal advice and support as an in-house counsel. Prior to his current role, he served as a legal manager at Dyna Group of Companies PLC, where he managed the company's contractual agreements and provided technical leadership in developing legal and compliance framework. He holds an LLM degree with specialization in labor and industrial relations law, private law, and planning law from the University of Lagos. Additionally, he has obtained certifications in compliance, privacy laws, and data protection to stay abreast of industry trends and regulatory requirements. Thank you so much, sir. We can see you're already on call. It's nice to have you with us here on today's session. We look forward to hearing from you, but we'll just have the introduction of our other mentors, and then we'll kick off with the sets with today's topic. So our second mentor for today is Perry Timi. Sorry, Ma, if I did not um, get the pronunciation of your name very correctly. I sincerely do apologize. Perry Timi Pere. Perry Timi is a senior associate at AELEX Technology, Media and Telecommunications Practice. She obtained her master's degree in information technology law from Fordham University, New York. In her role at AELEX, she regularly advises diverse tech startups and their business structures, regulatory compliance, fundraising, contracts, negotiations, and other corporate/slash commercial and governance issue. We are happy to have you with us, Ma. We are so privileged to have you and Mr. Raphael come mentor our next generation of not just fintech as enthusiasts, but also fintech lawyers and fintech specialists in the areas of fintech. Our last but not least on our mentor list for today is Mr. George Onyiwuchi. Um, Mr. George Onyenwuchi currently heads fintech engagements for First Bank and its subsidiaries across Africa at its Digital Innovation Lab, setting up and driving the bank's fintech strategy. George is a link that connects technology, business, and ecosystem partnership. He is at the intersection of product partnership and ecosystem building. He has led the tech solution product developments for the SME banking business of the leading commercial bank and has taken numerous financial and non-financial products from ideas to markets and growth. He has led digital transformation in the client engagement processes for leading commercial banks, including one of Nigeria's banking industry first end-to-end account opening for corporate accounts and SME digital lending. His team has won numerous awards for powering growth of SMEs. He also provides advisory for Crypt.Africa towards developing blockchain infrastructure and building the operating system for African businesses on the blockchain, and hosts knowledge sessions on blockchain application to various industries within the African context. Um, we are happy to have our three mentors. Okay, Mr. George is not here with us, but I'm very sure he'll be joining in very soon. We are happy to have all our mentors with us. Um, we look forward to having an exciting session. I can see quite a number of mentees already with us. So we'll just go straight into the business of today. We would like to hear from our mentors. I think we would like to start with Mr. Raphael, and then we'll have Miss Perry Timmy just come, just do an oversight and an introduction into the topic for today. Our topic for today is fintech contracts and transactions. So, Mr. Raphael, we would like to just hear from you. What would you like to share with us as regards to this topic? Just giving us an overview and an oversight of what fintech contracts and transactions entail. You're welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. So basically, the topic I'm going to be going into is basically tips for contract drafting. We will mainly touch fintech contracts as well, but generally when we're talking about contract drafting, whatever you discuss will apply to all contracts in general. So I've prepared a presentation for everyone that basically touches tips in contract drafting from my experience and the experience of my peers in the industry, in various industries. That's basically what we're going to be discussing from my end today.
All right, sir. Please, you can just help us run through it before we
Okay,
have our.
so I can start the presentation.
Yes, sir. You can.
Okay. All right,
can
that's
go
fine. I'll share the screen now. I'll share my screen. Just give me a minute. I believe you should be seeing my screen now.
Not yet, sir. Okay. Yeah, your screen is coming on. Thank you. So on now.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go through it quickly. Our topic is essentials for contract drafting, overview, tips for modern lawyers. It's a knowledge shared by Raphael Franklin Okeke, that is me, and that is the date. So let's go straight into it. Introduction. Contract drafting is a fundamental skill for lawyers as it lays foundation for legal relationships and transactions. So, and contracts serve as a blueprint for agreements between parties, outlining their rights, their obligations, their responsibility, what they owe each other. So the intent of a contract, the basic intent of a contract is to prevent a dispute, is to ensure that whatever I am buying or whatever I am selling, I'm able to sell it according to the terms that I want to sell them, or I'm able to buy it according to the terms that I want to buy them. Now, what I'm buying is what I'm receiving, and what services I'm acquiring or what services I'm offering is also what I'm receiving. So contracts is not just about buying and selling services and products. There are contracts that are protective in nature, like an NDA, data processing contracts, data protection contracts, licensing contracts. So the intent is to have a legal binding document that binds both parties to the obligations they agree to. That's the very simple definition and very simple explanation of what a contract is. So, importance of contract drafting. Contract is the foundation of business transactions, legal relationship. Well-drafted contracts can prevent disputes and protect parties' rights. Role of a contract in legal practice. Contracts govern various aspects of business, personal dealings. They serve as legal binding agreements that align rights, obligations, and expectations. So, what is a contract? I've given a very simple definition, and that is because most of the skills I'll be trying to speak about here in contract drafting is as simple as it comes. Keep it simple. Keep your wording simple. Keep your arrangement simple. Keep your structure simple. And so I've gone with that same thing by saying a contract is a legally enforceable agreement between two or more parties. Simple and straight. Key elements of a contract. Most of you are lawyers here, so you will know basically the basic elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, legal intent, capacity, and consent. So the importance of clarity and precision. A clear and precise language ensures that parties understand their rights, understand their obligations, and it prevents, just like I've said before, it prevents the likelihood of disputes. Overview of various contracts. Now, the reason why I've added this is basically every contract needs a different approach. A lot of contracts come with different approach. They come with different considerations. They come with different skills that you have to apply. So the way you draft an employment contract is different from the way you draft a lease contract. It's different from the way you draft a service contract, an NDA, licensing agreements, privacy. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a list I was able to come up with based on my experience. There are a lot of different types of contracts and different types of contract that cover different types of possibility and possible needs. So basically, the type of contract you need is what you tailor to the specific need of your client or the company you work for if you are in-house like me. So each type of contract may require specific clauses and considerations tailored to the parties' needs and the subject matter of the agreement. Each contract has a type and each contract type has unique considerations, necessitating customizing the contract to the specific need of your client or your company, in my case, just like I said. Right, pre-drafting consideration. Pre-drafting consideration is basically when you receive, a request or you receive a brief from a client that this is a service I'm providing, or this is a service I want to buy, or this is a transaction I'm entering. I need a document for it. So you have an initial client meeting, an initial contract, initial meeting with your client, and he or she lays out what they want to achieve in that contract, in that transaction. You take note of that. So you discuss your objectives, their expectations and the concerns of the client. Because a lot of times your client has a concern. They have a need. They have something they want to prevent in that document. There's a reason they want a contract, because they want to prevent a dispute a likely dispute. So it's in this initial client meeting that you ask a few questions. What are the likely areas of dispute from this type of transaction? What are the likely areas that could be an issue with this particular customer or with this particular party on the other side? So when you have identified the need, it gives you an idea of your risk assessment, because when you understand the client's goal and you also understand the goal of the other party, you'll be able to identify the potential risks, and this will help you, couch and structure your contract to address those specific needs and those specific possible risk. So if you have a customer, or if you have a service or a contract where the services is going to be on ground and the customers, maybe you are representing the supplier of a service and the service is going to be on ground in the customer's premises, having an understanding of that aspect of the transaction will help you understand that, oh, I have to put in indemnities, I have to put in protections that protect my clients' personnel who are going to be on ground, or my clients' equipment who are going to be in the customer's premises or in the customer's possession. So this is a very essential part of the initial contracting stage where you identify these things, because there are templates, right? But what makes you a good lawyer, right, is couching your document to specifically address your clients or your company's needs, or whoever you are representing in that transaction, their specific needs. So this initial drafting consideration, the drafting area is very important. Structuring the contracts, introduction and definition, main body. This is basically the structure of the document. The main body, rights, obligations, and your boilerplate provisions, like termination, dispute resolution, governing law, force majeure, liquidated damages. Now, this boilerplate provision are basically provisions that must be in every contract, including fintech contracts, including technology-related contracts, including licensing contracts. So you must have a force majeure, you must have a governing law, you must have a dispute resolution clause, you must have a termination clause, you must have a duration. If it's not a duration, you must specifically state if it's a contract that doesn't have a duration, like a contract that is, that continues in perpetuity unless there is a termination. So these are boilerplate provisions that must be in every contract. Then appendices and schedules. So what we usually have in our appendices and schedules, especially if it's a tech-related contract, well, from my experience in tech contracts, we always have an SLA, we always have data processing agreements as a separate schedule. And we also always have, if it's fintech, you have things like technical provisions, like when you are having interconnection between different parties, or sharing data, or secure cyber security provisions. That may not be within our area of expertise, but it's important that you have that knowledge that this should be in that type of contract, so your clients will be able to negotiate or provide that type of inclusion. Going to the next. So drafting tips for clarity. Now we'll just jump into the straight tips and skills that I'm talking about. Like I said in the beginning, use of plain language, very important. It ensures that both parties understand their obligations, understand what is owed, understand the representations they are making in this document. And that way you are able to avoid disputes in the future, because they know what is expected of them. They are not confused in any way of what they are paying, or what they are providing, or whatever obligations they have in that transaction. So make it very clear. I always try my contracts to make it as simple as possible, so that it does not affect interpretation. Even if there's a dispute in the future, be it arbitration, or be it that we end up in mediation or in court. But if the document is as clear and clean and straight to the point as possible, you have whichever lawyer is going to handle the litigation will be able to anticipate what is the exposure here, what is the extent of liability for my client, or what can happen in court. Because if the document is clear and the document aligns with applicable law, you'll be able to win almost every time. So avoid ambiguity, define technical terms. This is very important in tech-related contracts because especially when you have your clients inputting their own obligation or the scope of work, it's very important you collaborate with your clients specifically to ensure that these technical terms are defined, because what the other party thinks one term is maybe which example will I give now? I don't have an example to my head now, but there could be a technical term that is a different definition for the other party. And if it's not clearly defined in the document, that could create confusion in the future where there's an expectation because you are saying this term, this particular technical term applies, and so an obligation should arise from this term, and the other party is saying no. So define any technical term and industry-specific terms used in the contract. Keep sentences short and clear. Drafting tips for precision. Now, you may say, you're giving me drafting tips for clarity. Now you're giving me drafting tips for precision. Now, the difference between precision and clarity. Clarity, we're talking about avoiding ambiguity and keeping your language plain and simple. But in drafting tips for precision, we're talking about specificity, basically. Be specific. Provide precise details regarding rights, obligations, and timelines. So this is about not forgetting what to add, right? If you have a licensing agreement, if you are not specific about your licensing provisions in the documents, I mean, about all your provisions on IP, on what each party's obligations is to indemnities or to limitation of liability or to insurance. This is what it means about being specific. Avoid vagueness, define roles and responsibilities clearly, anticipate potential issues and address them. Now, this last part definitely comes with time, because the more you do, the more you engage in a type of transaction or advice on a type of contract, you will be able to, in the future, identify and anticipate the potential issues that could arise in the contract and be able to specifically address them in the contract. Negotiation skills for contracting. Negotiating is very important. Every contract is negotiated, almost every contract. And even if it seems like maybe one other party just agrees to everything, there must have been a point where they will say, this is how we want it, and the other party says, this is how we want it, and they come to a conclusion. So every contract is negotiated. So, and there are contracts that create, large and very complicated negotiations. So you need to be able to have these skills and understanding of a few things in negotiating contracts. You must be effective, you must be straightforward. Don't be ambiguous in your communication with the other party of what you expect from this particular document or the particular clause in question. Actively listen to them. Actively listen to a lot of times a party's concerns may come from something that is not even related to the clause. So if you actively listen to the other party, you'll be able to sort of come up with, it's easier to come up with middle ground solutions with the other party. Create problem solving, building rapport. Yeah. Networking is important in negotiation. If you have a rapport with the other party, if you have an understanding that you are not trying to strong arm them, that this is the reason I want to protect my client from this aspect. If you have a rapport with them, it's easier for them to get your point, and it's also easier for you to understand where they're coming from. So, understanding power dynamics. So, understanding power dynamics, leverage them during negotiations. The idea of power dynamics is simple to me. A lot of times they say the buyer of the service is the lord and king in contracting, but sometimes it's not always the case. If the seller or the provider of the service is basically a monopoly, maybe they do not have competition out there, a lot of times you see that a vendor can't set out the terms of a contract, can say, this is how I wish to provide this service, and this is how this is the type of indemnity I can give you. I will not give you a total indemnity. I want my liabilities limited, so on and so forth. So recognizing these power dynamics will help you navigate and negotiate. I'm trying to keep the time, so I'll just skip through a few. Now, what are the common pitfalls? I think I've spoken about most of the pitfalls to avoid: ambiguity, inconsistencies, overly complex language. They don't achieve more. They confuse they confuse both the judges, they confuse both the arbitrators, and at the end of the day, dispute is expensive. Even arbitration is expensive. And if you know you're drafting a document that is ultimately going to end up in dispute, you are just costing your clients and the company you work for in-house money and much more money. So review and revision. This is the review and revision stage. Importance of thorough review the contract carefully to ensure accuracy and consistent. Obtain feedback from colleagues or mentors to advance areas of improvement. I'm talking about subject matter experts, maybe especially for very technical documents. You see, the world is going AI, the world is going tech, the world is going into IT, and so a lot of contracts that we have to deal with, especially us that do a lot of contracts, are really related to technology. And sometimes we are not the subject matter experts. And sometimes it's not bad to admit that you do not fully understand what a cloud computing contract is. So engaging subject matter experts, which in many cases will be your client on these aspects, is very important. Review process, iterative. Review the contract iterative based on feedback, and always do review, always clean up and keep it clear. So we'll go into specific tips for fintech contract. Now, fintech is very wide. A lot of people think fintech is just banking applications, but not necessarily. We have fintech that is BTCs. You understand? We have fintech that is for forex. We have fintech that is securities based. Applications like Bamboo, where you used to invest in different companies, either abroad or in Nigeria, and buying and selling of shares. Those are fintech because it is financial and it is technologically connected. So it's important to understand the industry. It's better we understand the specific, even under fintech, there are sub-industries. You understand? Like I said, there are the payment providers, there are the payment platform providers, there are the processors, there are the middlemen, there are the supporters, the vendors that supports sub-vendors and subcontractors. So you have to understand the industry of that specific contract. Having you understand that industry, you'll be able to understand the pitfalls and how you can approach that contract. Data is very important in fintech. Almost everything is data, right? Almost every subcontractor is receiving some sort of data, whether that data is encrypted, whether that data it comes in whatever form, data is involved. And that data must be protected. So having a robust data protection clause is important. Robustly to avoid indemnities for your client if your client is the one receiving most of the data, processing most of the data, or to protect data that is in the hands of a data controller. A company like MTN that I work for is a major data controller, and so data protection and privacy is very, very, very important in fintech contracts. So include provisions for IP, licensing, IP, software. Data, fintech is basically software, so there's a lot of IP involved. Sometimes even the companies that are even in one transaction have no IP going in between them, but their own subcontractors, their background vendors have IP involved. So it's always important to clearly define ownership rights of IP, licensing and arrangements, proprietary technology and intellectual property involved. Account for regulatory change. So that's important. See, fintech some people say fintech is heavily regulated. Some say it's not regulated enough. But one thing is true: regulation for fintech will always change. It's likely to change in the future. It's likely to improve in the future. It's likely there will be change because it's a fast growing industry, and the government is always keeping tabs, especially CBN and the rest of the regulators. And fintech is one of those industries that has a whole lot of regulators. We're talking NOTAB, we're talking NIDA, we're talking FCCPC, we're talking CBN, we're talking SEC. They have a lot of regulators. They have a lot of, you have a lot of institutions that are issuing directive, issuing regulatory advisories, issuing instructions, and so it's important that you account for those regulatory changes. What I would advise here is, keep it simple, ensure that parties know that this document is subject to regulation. So if there's a regulatory change that could affect an obligation of that party, it should not result in indemnities or liabilities for any of the parties involved. So anticipate that. Ensuring security and compliance. Security is a very major thing in fintech, right? So even if it's important you have provisions in the documents that address security measures, that address anti-money laundering requirements, know your customer regulations, ensure compatibility and interoperability between different systems and technologies. Contracts may specify technical standards, like our contracts in MTN. We have technical protocols. Now, this doesn't come from me. There's an interface between different stakeholders in the company, and so if you are in practice and not in-house like me, it's important that you remind your clients. If your client is in fintech, they would have these protocols, and so it's important you remind your client that let me have these protocols, and so let's impute it into the contract to ensure that your vendor or whoever we are contracting with knows that they have these are the processes or these are the technical standards that are expected of them. Consult industry specific requirements. Yeah. Considerations of fintech in Nigeria. So regulatory fintech, like I've already said, they have a lot of regulators from NIDA, FCPC, even Federal Inland Revenue Service. Nigerian Data Protection the new Nigerian Data Protection Commission is heavy on enforcement right now. NOTAP, we're talking SEC. So when you are approaching a fintech contract, it's important you look through what is the regulatory landscape for this particular contract, for what this contract covers. Do some research on that before you enter. It helps you understand what you should be protecting for your customer, what you should for your client, what you should be, enforcing, ensuring that the contract contains licensing and registration, understanding licensing and registration requirement for fintech companies operating in God. Now, you can make representation that whoever you're engaging, if it's a contract between two fintech companies, that the fintech company has the fintech company on the other side has the adequate licensing and registration requirements in order to provide or to engage in this type of transaction. Data localization and protection. Consider Nigeria's data protection laws, such as Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. That's an act now. So forgive me for saying regular. I'm so used to saying the NDPR. I not change that, but that's an act, the Nigerian Data Protection Act 2023, which requires data localization, cross-border transactions. So a lot of time in fintech, data is moving across borders. It's moving into the EU, it's coming back to Nigeria, it's moving into the United USA, it's coming back. So today, data is always moving, howbeit in encrypted form. So sometimes if this data is being, kept in the cloud, in servers in different countries, important to that's the cross-border, how the transaction addresses, how the contract addresses cross-border transaction. Important that it's in there. So there will be consideration of the DDPR. If it is the Europe, there will be consideration of the US, different US laws. If you know, depending on the state, because US doesn't have a centralized data protection system. Every state or most states have different data protection provision. Legal jurisdiction, specified legal jurisdiction, and dispute resolution mechanisms. A lot of times now, I'm seeing from experience in fintech contracts, especially when you know you are dealing with cross-border parties, it's important you just specify a neutral jurisdiction. A lot of times you don't want to agree to Nigerian law. A lot of times you can specify specific things. You can say, oh, for this particular software, this particular part of the transaction will be covered by Nigerian law. This particular part will be covered by whatever foreign law they are trying to push. Well, like I said in the beginning, I like to keep it simple. And when we're having a clash or a conflict of applicable law negotiation, what I try to push is let's just have a neutral one. And what we have found to be very neutral for us is the laws of England, using the English law, because it's something that's it's something we can relate to. It's not so alien like the other laws. It's something you can anticipate. Most of our laws were pulled from England, and most of our laws are based on English law. Keeping abreast with legal development. This is a personal skill you will have to develop, ensuring that you are in tune with the times, and it would also help you in improving your contracts over time, improving your contract drafting skills over time. Continuing legal education. This is one of those instances. Utilizing legal tech tools, practical law, LexisNexis. This will help you, in your research, and help you identify what you should put in your contract, or the type of risk you should be anticipating. So thank you very much. I hope I've not done over 15 minutes. I feel like I went on too long. So I don't know if we can go into Q&A, or is there what's the next moderator?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, sir. We have a whole section, a whole segment for Q&A, and that will be coming on later in the program. We'll call you subsequently, very shortly, for after our mentees make presentations, so that you can give feedbacks and maybe any further contributions that you would like to add. Right. So we'll be having you later on, sir. Right. Okay. I want to apologize that my video is currently not turned on. I had a little technical issue with my device, so I had to turn off my video. I sincerely do apologize. Right. I would like to also now give the floor to our second mentor, who is currently with us, Miss Perry Timmy, to just help us. Also, just run through from your own perspective and from your own point of view on our topic for today, fintech contracts and transaction. Then we'll have presentation from our mentees, then mentors feedback. So thank you very much, Ma. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, thank you very much, Raphael, for that very detailed. At this point, I think I really don't have anything much more to say, because that was a very detailed presentation, and it basically covered or touched on essentially everything I was also going to discuss here today. And I don't see maybe why I would have to then go ahead and repeat it. But just to add to what you have said, I won't be sharing my screen, because literally we've covered literally all I have to say. I'll just add a few tips here and there so that we can proceed to the mentees presentation. So whilst Raphael started with general contract tips, and then he went on to fintech transactions and contracts specifically, I think I'll just like to more or less like give examples of the kind of contracts that we typically see in the fintech industry, in your day-to-day relations when you're having to deal with fintech companies. There are some kind of contracts that are that they recall, right, in the course of fintech transactions and contracting. So I'd just like to give those examples. And I think I may also touch on one thing. Everything else Raphael has covered, and I will not be repeating what he has said. Okay, so one of the contracts that you typically find, you would have a merchant service agreement. So some of the fintech companies that we know, payment service companies, typically on board merchants. So one of the agreements that you would find them having is a merchant service agreement where they are onboarding merchants. So people who have businesses, e-commerces and other type of businesses. They have an agreement with some of these fintech companies whereby you're able to make payments. So when you pick up your phone and you want to buy something, maybe an Instagram seller or any of these service providers, and you're able to make payments. So sometimes you see Flutterwave comes up, OP and the rest of them. Typically, for that to happen, you would have the merchant service agreement. So Flutterwave would have onboarded those merchants, so they are able to use their payment solution to make that transaction happen. So you have that kind of agreement. You have a merchant service agreement. Sometimes you have there are other types of agreements. You could also have digital lending agreement. Like Raphael had mentioned, the fintech space is very large. The industry is large. You have different players. You have those who provide payment solutions. You have digital lenders. You have you just have a range of companies providing different services, mobile money operators. So, and for these different fintech companies, the contracts that you would see among them would differ. They would have some general contracts that will apply across board, but then they have some specific contracts. So in case of digital lenders now, you could have a digital lending agreement, right, between the lender and the borrower. So you have that kind of agreement. You would also typically have a white labeling agreement. So a white labeling agreement essentially is just an agreement where a company produces or develops a software and they license it to another company, whereby that company is using their brand. So assuming Raphael develops a software and he licenses it to me personally, I'm not using the software and using Raphael's name. It would be as though it is it would be bearing my name. So it would be me payments, whatever it is. So at the back end, you have had an agreement whereby Raphael is I'm being enabled to use that software. So that's in summary what a white label agreement would be. Also, you can have, so give me a minute. I hope I'm audible because I'm not quite sure.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Also, you can have software development agreement. So as against a white labeling agreement where a company develops the agreement and then outsources it to another brand, you could have a software development agreement where a company gets to hire a software developer or another company, software development company, to develop their software for them, the software that they will be using for the fintech service that they are providing. So you could also have that sort of agreement. And then you can also have partnership agreements, right? And for partnership agreement, it will vary because most of the fintech players, you'll find a lot of partnerships going on there. The payment service providers would need to have some form of arrangement with the banks, and then the banks will have some arrangement with the switching companies. So most of these agreements, just the general terminology that can be used is a partnership agreement. So you find the payment service provider having some form of partnership with I don't want to use a very technical term, but let's say the acquiring bank. So the bank where you're having to make the payment into, those sort of relationships, you typically have a partnership agreement for it. And then there are other agreements that could be generic. So it's not specific to the fintech industry, but then you find that it's also used a lot in the fintech industry, like NDAs. So maybe prior to even entering into any of these agreements, you want to sign an NDA with the other party or other person to ensure the confidentiality of some of the information that you would be sharing in the course of the agreement and negotiation. So typically an NDA would precede most agreements. And you could also have a data sharing agreement. And in this case, it could be generic and it could also be specific to fintech companies. Let me clarify that. So the data sharing agreement can happen in a general sense where a company that's not a fintech could share data with some other company. But for fintechs, and particularly in Nigeria, there's something called the open banking regulation, where the idea is to foster information sharing between most of these financial institutions and fintechs. And in that case, you typically be expected to have a data sharing agreement to ensure the protection and privacy of the data subjects. So essentially, the data you'll be sharing, you should be able to ensure its protection. And under that open banking regulation, it's a very crucial agreement, a data sharing agreement, which is why I said it could be specific to the fintech industry and it could also be general. And then under general agreements, you could also have like we hear all the time, well, this fintech has raised this amount, or you want to raise this fund. To raise funds, you typically would have agreements in place with your investors for whatever money that they're putting into your company, essentially to just outline the obligations, outline the responsibilities of the parties, and to ensure that every party is clear as to what the terms are surrounding the funding, right? So you could have an equity financing agreement, it could be debt financing agreement, whatever source or whatever mode of fundraising you have chosen, and we typically have an agreement to back that up. So I think that's just one addition. And the next thing I was going to mention, I think Raphael already touched on it, but I could just mention a few more. There's some specific clauses that you would want to ensure when you're entering into some of these agreements. For example, in a let's say a payment service agreement, or let's say a merchant onboarding agreement, right? You want to ensure that the merchant or even the payment service provider has their KYC, because for the regulators like CBN, KYC is very big deal. You need to ensure that you know your customer, you have your customer details. So you want to have that provision in there to ensure that the other party has their KYC details and then has their KYC in place rather. And then also AML and CFT, that's anti-money laundering provisions. You want to ensure that the party that you're transacting with has anti-money laundering policies in place, and that they ensure that they are not being used, and that even you partnering with them at some point, it's not being used to launder money, right? So you want to have those provisions in place. This is in addition to the boilerplate clauses that Raphael already mentioned. You want to have your term, what's the duration of your agreement. You want to ensure that you have your dispute resolution clauses very, very tight, because sometimes you do not envisage, you typically, sometimes you think, oh, this is an innocuous agreement. We don't expect to have any dispute, but dispute comes at any point and at any time. So you want to have those clauses well drafted and covered in your agreement. You'd also want to have your data protection clause in whatever agreement you're drafting, provided that some form of personal data will be shared. That's a clause that it's a non-negotiable. So the law actually requires you to ensure that whatever party you're negotiating with or contracting with has data protection policies in place to ensure that the data of their data subjects are protected. So if you're entering into let's say, even a merchant service agreement, for example, you'd have a data protection clause to ensure that the data that is being shared or the data that the payment service provider is receiving, that they have policies in place that ensures that they are in compliance with the regulations, right? And yes, so depending again on the specific agreement that you're going into, you want to review, I think Raphael touched on this as well, you want to review the laws that are relevant to that specific agreement and ensure that you include specific clauses that the regulators require you to have in your agreement. So most times you would find in some of the CBN regulations where they say contracting parties should have this clause, contracting parties should ensure that they have an agreement that touches on this and that. So those are things that you definitely want to, those are things that we definitely want to look out for. I think, yeah, intellectual property is also very important. Raphael mentioned that, and I'd just like to emphasize it again because it's important. I have other clauses here, but he mentioned those, and I won't be repeating it. But for intellectual property, you want to be very certain. So for something like a white labeling agreement or a software development agreement, your intellectual property clause has to be very airtight, right? You have to ensure who has the intellectual property, if it's being licensed, how it can be used, if consent is going to be required, for how long, and things like that. So you don't want to leave that clause outside. And yes, generally regulatory compliance. I think Raphael also touched on this, but I have this because sometimes you may not be able to typically include all the clauses that you would ordinarily apply to a contract, right, based on regulations. So you want to have a clause there which would maybe fall under your representation and warranties that the other party is committing or confirming that they have that they are complying or they're in compliance with all regulations that relate to them as a company and also in terms of the agreement. So that could be like a general clause that captures the regulatory side of things where you're not able to include all the provisions that may be relevant to that specific contract. So you want to have that sort of general clause that helps you cover for those loopholes. So this is just in addition to what Raphael has said, and I think yeah, I'll just wrap it up there so that I don't spend more time than necessary. So yes, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Peritimi, for helping us just run through and also just giving further perspective to the subject matter for today. We really appreciate both what you and Mr. Raphael has shared in, I think, about the last 40 minutes combined, joined together. And we really do appreciate your shared time, your shared knowledge, and your shared experience. So every week we normally do have presentations from our mentees, just in an effort to have them further research or have their own research and come up with lessons and things that we would want or will have them know before they approach each session. So we would like to also hear from our mentees right about now. We would like to also get their presentation based on what they were able to research so that they can share with the whole class. In the next 10 minutes, group presenter will just like you to run through the presentation for the week so that we can move on and get feedbacks from our mentees, their observations, their corrections, and any further thing they would like to add. So the group presenter for the week, please, you can come up and make your presentation. Please do ensure to share your screen so that we can follow through on your presentation. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Fever. Please go ahead.
All right. Can you see my screen also?
Yes, your screen is visible.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Just give me a moment. All right. Thank you. So today I'll be presenting for this week. My name is Duliamba Fiwo, And our topic for today, or what we researched on, was fintech transactions and contract. So under that, we are going to be discussing blockchain and smart contract. What exactly is blockchain? What is smart contract? And how it relates to fintech. Then we are going to discuss regulatory framework under fintech in Nigeria, especially for the purpose of this presentation. We we are also going to discuss security and privacy in the fintech space. And then finally, we're also going to discuss fintech transaction scalability and efficiency. So how can you scale a fintech transaction? How can you also make it efficient even while you're scaling it? So you don't want a situation whereby you are maybe you're providing services for, let's say, just 1,000 people, and then you want to make it for 100,000 people, and then you can't be able to maintain that same efficiency, right? So these are some of the things we're going to be discussing. Now, what is blockchain technology? Now, blockchain technology is a decentralized digital ledger that records transactions across multiple computers. It provides transparency, security, and eliminates the needs for intermediaries. It makes cryptocurrency transaction more effective without the need of any person to foster this transaction in the fintech industry. And it does all these very smart contracts. Now, when we talk about blockchain, we are talking about a form of decentralized ledger where just think of it as having different boxes, and then all any transaction you effect or you handle is it simultaneously happens across all those systems around the world, thousands possibly of interconnected systems. So one of the advantages of this is the fact that it provides for security in your transaction. You can have a more permanent and reliable transaction. You can be sure that, okay, your record is actually there, no one can tamper with it, right? And then it's also efficient in smart contract. Now, when we talk about smart contract, what is smart contract? Smart contract has to do with a self-executing contract with the terms of agreement directly written into code. This automatically execute action when certain conditions are met. These contracts are designed to enforce the rules and terms of agreement between parties without the need for intermediaries such as banks or lawyers. So basically, what this happens is the fact that instead of having a middleman that facilitates um, our contract, we just have it amongst ourselves, and then we have an agreement. Okay, let's say I do A. Once I do A and B, then C will happen automatically. So if I for most people that do services online, for instance, let's say now if I want to incorporate smart contract into an online service space, and then let's say I'm a freelance worker, and then I, for instance, have been able to, you asked me to make a video for you, right, for this presentation, and then I did that. Now I can share you that video, you can view it, but then you cannot be able to use it after I just view it only once, for instance. Once you like it, my payment will be made to me, for instance, and then you have access to that video. Basically, now that's maybe a way you can apply smart contract in that instance in a way all of us can understand. So smart contract has to do with basically contract that are able to self-execute themselves once certain terms and conditions have been met. Now, next is what are the benefits of the blockchain, and what are the benefits blockchain makes in fintech through smart contract? And these are some things that will be highlighted below. And then now the first is it has increased automation. So a lot of when it comes to execution of contract, there are a lot of things that are it's it's efficient on its own. You don't need someone to try to enforce that contract or to manage the contract cycle or all those things that require a lot of people services, right? So it's just okay, you've automated it. Okay, once party A performs his task, the contract will automatically self-execute. So party A gets his consideration or what he actually wants by the result of him performing that particular task. Now, it also increased transparency. Now, when we talk about increased transparency, and due to the fact that fintech, it goes on, maybe blockchain rather, goes on in a decentralized form in various systems, right? And then most of these things are immutable, so you cannot change some of those information anyhow you want, right? So there are even if someone wants to change a particular information, the other system have that permanent record. So you are sure that okay, anything you do is transparent across board. You don't have there's no gray line. Okay, now this person is not really clear about certain things, or someone can manipulate their information. You are sure that your information is saved, and then the record are well kept. Talking about record being well protected, right? We talk about improved security. Now, because these systems are set up in such a way, and there's transparency, and then so you are sure that any transaction you go into, basically you are sure that it will actually scale through, right? Then also it also reduces cost. And how can it reduce cost? By removing a third party in every contract you do. Basically, you are sure that okay, the cost you will have used to employ people that will be in charge of all those intermediary duties, right, are being cut off, and then so basically you you save cost in payment and other forms. Now, contract smart contract also improves compliance. And so basically, it's because okay, now once you are able to perform your tasks, you are sure that okay to be fully executed. So the other party doesn't have anything he can do about it, because once you are able to perform your tasks, then you are sure that okay, such actions has been will be executed, and then you can have the benefit of whatever contract you entered into. So basically, you are sure that okay that the compliance is being met to the strictest sense. Now, what are the challenges that we face, right? And then, as much as we have some of those benefits, every system or product will have some of the challenges it will face, especially in its early days, right? So, what are the challenges? Now, the first is safety. When smart contracts are made poorly, the security can be tampered with, leading to cyber attacks. Now, as we all know that for if you want a job to be well done, you need to have people that are experts in those fields that can be able to help do that very well or properly for you, right? And then so now, due to the lack of expertise, you see people engaging in some of those contracts that are are are, are, are done pretty poorly, and then those those contracts are susceptible to tampering and then cyber attacks. So it's some of the challenges that we face. And the decentralization of blockchain, the fact that blockchain is decentralized can foster issues in jurisdiction that have rules already governing them. So when I talk about jurisdiction, is as to what regulations should be complied with in the first place. Like our speakers have said earlier on, you can actually end up agreeing what in an instance where you are going into a contract, you can decide, okay, now we should be governed by the law of Nigeria or by the law of England or by any international law, right? But then what happens in a situation whereby it is that of a smart contract? I will leave that for our our mentors to come and enlighten us on that. And also we talk about employee skill gap. Now, the fact that blockchain is a new technology and many people are not really aware and then conversant with that technology, right? Now, in Nigeria, for instance, we already have a skill gap when it comes to digital. There's a digital divide, a huge digital divide. And then now we have blockchain, a new form of technology again. Now, even among those that can use technology, most people can still not use it for other application, normal common applications, things like Microsoft Office. And then I'm trying to think about okay, now we need people that are also expert in blockchain technology and all those things. Now the gap is it just keep widening. So getting people that are that good and develop these requisite skills are not easy. So there is shortage of soft skills. And so these are just some of the things that we encounter. And then we also have to also take note of the issue about when we talk about use of blockchain. Also, we talk about privacy issues. I think when I was researching for my project in the university, one of the issues that I was trying to discuss was the fact that privacy allows for right one of the rights that are guaranteed under privacy is your right to delete your information, and then to have it erased, right? Right to erasure. Now, blockchain technology makes it harder for you to actually enforce that particular right due to the fact that it's immutable, and then it's almost impossible for you to completely delete your information. So, how can we solve some of those issues? Those are some of the challenges that we have to discuss and then provide solutions. Of course, there will be different thought and opinion regarding that, but then these are some of the things I would like to also hear from our mentors to get a better perspective from. Now, we're talking about what are the regulatory framework for fintech transactions in Nigeria. Well, I think one of the first one that we all know is the Corporate Affairs Commission, which were created by the Corporate and Allied Matters Act. And so these are the major governing body when it comes to registration of any company in Nigeria. So any fintech company that want to come in, as long as a company, it must be incorporated in Nigeria. And so they have to keep they have to be compliant with the CAC, that's Corporate Affairs Commission. Now the next is we have the BOFIA Act, which that's bank the BOFIA Act, that which is the financial institution that regulates banks generally and other financial institutions, so insurance companies and including fintech, of course. So this act also is one of the main governing body, right? And then the CBN is the major when it comes to any bank transaction in Nigeria. The CBN regulations talk about their guidelines. They are the major governing body when it comes to any bank transaction of any bank transaction of any bank business in Nigeria. Now, of course, we have other also things that they have to comply with. Talk about KYC, that's know your customer. That's the fact that okay, every bank or banking institution must have certain level of information about their customers, right? Whether the person is a whether the person is has the level of okay, what are the necessary information that they need to know the person, whether the person is a politically exposed person or not, and all those certain information. Then we have the Security and Exchange Commission, right, which basically regulates security transactions and investment across Nigeria. So these are some of the major the regulatory bodies that they have to keep in line with. Of course, there are other things like the antitrust laws and everything that are there to actually protect consumers from unfair competitions, right? But then these are just the basic ones that we are going to discuss for today. Now, the next is what are fintech transaction scalability and efficiency. When we talk about scalability, it's about it refers to the ability of a system to handle an increased number of transactions without compromising performance. Now, for so when we talk about scalability, it's part okay now. If I'm operating at let's say 10,000 people for my company, then if I want to increase it to 100,000, and this is trying to scale up my business, right? Now, how do I as a fintech company, how do fintech companies actually ensure that they are scalable and then efficient at the same time? And the first one is using cloud computing software. Now, cloud computing software has to do with providing computer services on the internet online. So things like storage, accounting, and bookkeeping, all those things can be done online, right? So you are not limited by location, right? You can work remotely and then you can still have access to such information. So things like Google Doc, Google Spreadsheet, the Google Drive, all those things are just examples of cloud computing software that we've been using. Now we have the distributed ledger technology. Now, I would like to also add that this is a form of ledger technology that also has information spread across different systems, right? And then blockchain is part of this distributed ledger technology. And then we have application programming interface. Now, application programming interface are basically application that helps us interact with two different maybe companies or products online or services online. We talk about things like Flutterwave, for instance. So if you want to it connects your bank and any online platform that you want to make a transaction with, right? So it brings in your information from your bank, and then it also help facilitate the transfer of money that you are going to do on that particular platform. So these are just some of the things that you have to include when talk about scalability. Now, how can you make your even as you are trying to scale your business, how do you ensure that is efficient? Now, of course, you have to make sure that you provide things like faster payment. People are use technology, of course. So now everything needs to be done as fast as possible, right? So you have things that help facilitate faster payment. We talk about using artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence can be used in fraud detection, in ensuring or in better analyzing of information, right? So big data and all this information that comes in. So you can be able to better analyze those information and then go through them and be able to create better policies, provide good consumer experience for your customers, right? So these are so maybe using things like chatbots and all those things to provide better consumer experience for those people that are using your platform. Now, the next one is robotics process automation. Now, there are like I was talking about chatbot. If you can implement artificial intelligence, there are things that can be executed on its own without someone actually being there to be able to ensure that such things are done, because the AI software that you're going to use on your platform can be able to are trained to be able to perform such tasks, right? So these are some of the issues. Then we talk so and then you have issues that also comes across advancement in payment processes. So when we talk about advancement in payment processes, we're talking about what are the new ways payment are being done, right? People are talking about things like contactless payments. We're talking about mobile payment. So prior to that, when before technology was used in a large scale, and you have to go to the bank, you have to use checks and all those things for you to be able to make payment, or needed the cash, and then now you can just make transfer from your phone, right? And then we have moved to a stage whereby we talk about contactless payment, whereby you don't actually have to you don't have to swipe your card anymore, but then you can be able to make payment through radio waves, right, of that of your card, right? And then things like Mastercard and Visa, I think, and then I can't remember the other one, are some of the major ones that are being used right now. Of course, there are other ones, but then Mastercard and Visa are like one of the most popular ones. Then also you also have to take note of contract lifecycle
Sorry,
management. So
Favor. Sorry. Can you hear me, Favor? Sorry to
yes,
cut. Right, but I would just like for you, if it's going to be possible, for you to kind of hasten so that you can just round up a bit faster. Thank you.
thank you. I'm done actually already. So talk about contract life cycle. So what are the process from the initiation to the execution, and then to maybe entering into another contract. So you have to make sure that okay, you have people or experts and that's where lawyers come in, right? To be able to ensure that you are in compliance with all the regulatory bodies, and then all your contracts are executed properly to the latter. So these are just some of the things that you have to take note of. So that is all for our presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Favor, for that presentation. It was thorough and it was well done. It shows that you people put in a lot of work to get the research done, and I say well done to all the members of the group that put in the efforts to make sure that the presentation was ready, and then to the group presenter that was able to confidently give that presentation. I say well done to all of you. And now we'll just like to hear from our mentors again, looking into the presentation that was made. What are some of the thoughts, the observations, and probably any suggestions that you have for our mentees based on the research that they put in? So we would like to hear firstly from Mr. Raphael. Yes, sir, if you're still with us, yes, sir, we would just want to hear from you. What are your thoughts and observations based on the presentation that was made by the mentees, sir?
Okay, thank you. I think it was a good presentation. Uh, I I didn't know that much about blockchain, so I did learn a lot from it. Well, there was a question he did raise while he was presenting on the enforceability of smart contracts. I think the main question I think we should be asking is if smart contracts are even contracts in the first place. Uh, for me, in my own personal opinion, they are just automated contracts. Maybe that would be smart and automated means the same thing, because the word contract connotates the enforceability and the protection of the rights of the parties involved, and the enforceability of obligations. But where there's a glitch and where there is like you said, cyber attack, and where there are issues with the process completing, like whatever the smart contract is supposed to complete, where there's an issue with that completion. Where's what are the remedies available for the parties involved? What are the remedies involved? There's a high likelihood there are no real remedies involved. So maybe it's not really a contract. It's because the existence of the lawyers, because like you said, the process excludes lawyers from the process and excludes other third parties from the process. The existence of those parties were to create that protective cover. So where you have lost the lawyers, you have lost the third parties involved, like the insurers and the IP protections and so on and so forth. It doesn't become a contract anymore. So it's more of maybe just a smart automation, a smart AI automation, and maybe if the world begins to see it that way, they won't worry too much about calling it a contract, because they are sacrificing efficiency for the protection. That's basically what it is, in my opinion. Right. So that's my main thoughts from that presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Raphael, for that contribution. And thank you for helping address the question he raised while he made the presentation. So we'd like to also hear from Ms. Perisimi to just also your contributions, your feedback, and maybe any other oversights that you have as regards the presentation that was made, ma.
Thank you. Okay, I think that was a very good one. It was a very, I say, detailed presentation, especially as it relates to blockchain and smart contracts. I know that that's like the buzzword these days, and a lot of people have a lot of interest in it. So it was a good presentation. I think a lot of research also went into it. So kudos to the team. So what I'll just have to say to the presentation in general is appreciating that blockchain, as it were, is not limited to fintech transactions, right? So people can use blockchain for a whole number of different things. Again, I'm not a blockchain expert. It's a technical area, and a lot of people have expertise in that area. But to the best of my knowledge, it's not limited to just fintech transactions, right? Yes, whilst a lot of people, or whilst the technology is mostly being deployed in terms of financial technology, it's not limited to it. And what else did I need to add? Okay, I don't think there was anything much more that I wanted to add. In terms of where you're talking about the regulators, I think you were mixing both the regulators and the regulations. I just wanted to make that distinction, right? So you may have regulators, and then you may also have, and then have laws and regulations that essentially govern the fintech space. So for regulators, you can say you have the CBN, you have the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, the CSE, yeah, a bit more general, as it applies to all companies, and then a few other regulators, which I'm sure Raphael even mentioned in his earlier presentation. Then for regulations, you have a whole number of regulations, both from the SEC and from the CBN, right, touching on different aspects of fintech, of the fintech ecosystem and players in the fintech industry. So I think, yeah, that was one thing I also noted that I wanted to address. Yeah, that's about it for me. I at some point I got cut off, so I'm not sure that I have missed something, but that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. Thank you for your feedback into the presentation that was made. And right about now, we'll be going over to our mentees to just give the floor for you to ask questions. Just an opportunity for us to further try to, in a bid, get more from our mentors in that sense. So please, the floor is open to our mentees right about now to ask questions. So do we have questions that we would like to ask? You can send your questions into the chat box. We'll do well to read them to our mentors and make sure and get I'm sure they'll be able to answer them. And also you can raise your hand, indicates if you have a question, and we'll be taking your question. So please, do we have questions for our mentors? Do we have any questions from our mentees? Please, you can indicate if you have a question. I'm sure our mentors are ready to address any questions that you may have. Okay, questions. We're taking questions. Please, let's make this session a bit interactive. You can come up with questions. I don't think anything will be too little in that sense or too insignificant, right? So please, let's have questions. Questions, please. Okay. So I would be assuming that over the course of I think about 40 minutes plus, that our mentors spoke on the topic or the subject matter for today. Mr. Raphael sharing his slides and Ms. Peritemi just coming to further add and also buttress on the issues that pertain contracts, fintech contracts, and the likes that we all in that time were able to comprehend everything that was said. I'll be assuming that that is the disposition we have. So not to further, let's say, waste time, please, we'll just want to take a quick picture time so that for our social media postings, we do this normally to have to have our mentees be able to post what they've learned during the session. So please, if it's possible, can we have mentees turn on their video? Like again, I kindly apologize that my own video is turned off. Just personal technical issues that with my device that I'm currently dealing with. So please, can we have mentees turn on their video so that we can take a quick picture time? Okay. So please, can we have more people turn on their videos, more mentees? Thank you, Favor. Thank you so much, Mr. Raphael. Thank you, Mr. Francis. Thank you, Kosi Sochuku. Thank you, Ma. All right, do we have more people? Okay. I think that's just fine. I've been able to take a few. Thank you very much, Sir and Ma, to our mentors, and thank you so much to our mentees. that are here with us on call. Thank you for complying to turn on your videos. I want to say thank you once again to our mentors for their shared time, their shared knowledge, and their shared insights into today's topic, fintech contracts and transaction. It has really been so much in terms of the information shared. This session is currently being streamed on YouTube. So for the mentees, if at all, at any instance or at any time you want to revisit anything that the mentors, just to gain further clarification on anything the mentor has said, you can always log into our YouTube page and just search for the topic, and I'm sure you will see the pop-up for this particular class, and you can always go through it, always at your own convenience, at your own time. Always do that. I want to also advise our mentees, if it's possible, follow our mentors on social media, on their LinkedIn platform, connect with them, try as much as possible to connect with them. You can ask questions, and I'm sure they will be willing and ready to always answer you as to the best of their ability. So once again, thank you so much, Sir and Ma, for being here with us in today's session. It's been wonderful. It's been really great. And we look forward to having you all in subsequent quarters and also subsequent session, as the case may be. With that, we've come to the end of today's session on fintech, right? I wish everyone a wonderful weekend ahead. Tomorrow is Easter, so for those who will be celebrating, happy Easter in advance. I wish you all a wonderful celebration and a wonderful day ahead. With that, like I said, we've come to the end of today's session. See you all in the next class. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.